Floyd, nothing.
Nothing.
It was like steel shutters had come down behind the eyeballs of every one of those 60,000 young Iranians. They were gone. And I was staggered by that. And I was really shocked, really, really, really shocked. I couldn't believe it. And I saw it, I went back the next year and travelled extensively in the occupied territories. And until you go there and you see it, you cannot believe what a shock it is. You know, things that you wouldn't believe possible anywhere on the world, like different roads for people with different religion. Can you imagine?
Really?
Yeah, really. Can you imagine you're going from Austin to Dallas, and you can only go on the road if you're a Christian. If you're not a Christian, you can't go on the road. So if you're an atheist or some other thing, you're not allowed to drive on the road. You have to go on back roads, and they're all filled up with boulders and there are checkpoints. So the local indigenous people are not allowed to use the road. And you see that, and when you see it, you think, I don't believe this, but you get to believe it as you drive down. And all the checkpoints, and they have to go this way. Only people with yellow license plates can go through here, which means that they're Jewish Israelis. And it's mind-numbing. Fills you with despair when you see it. You think, how can this happen? It's 2007 or one of those. How can this be happening in the world and nobody where I live knows about it? Or if they do, they don't care. How can they not care? And I say, you might bring it up here and say, how would you feel if you weren't a Christian and that meant you couldn't use the road? I mean, it's so weird that it's hard to get your mind round believing that is the case. And that is what is called apartheid. And in those days, you couldn't use the word apartheid in relation to Israel. It was completely verboten in 2006. You could not use the word. You would have been strung up in the press and everywhere else and accused of being a Holocaust denier and this and that, Hitler and whatever. Now, it's very difficult to have a conversation about Israel and Palestine without in relation. And the problem is far more in the light, and we are looking at it. And there's more information for all of us about it than there was. That is the work that PBS has. And so it has made progress, and I'm glad it has, because what I desperately hope to live to see is a holy land. I don't care what it's called. From the River Jordan to the sea, where the people all have equal religious rights. All equal. And so that's what I work for. And maybe we should talk about something else, because if you wind me up, I might go on for hours.
Well, I'd be happy to wind you up. I mean, the definition of apartheid is, yes, it's segregation. I mean, that is segregation, clearly.
Yeah.
What is the...
It's the oppression of one ethnic group by another ethnic group.
Yes.
For those reasons, fact, different. So the South African model clearly applies, except that the South Africans who survived the South African model all say that the Israeli model is far worse than the white South Africans. The white South Africans at least, well, they poured money from the black population part, which they failed to do. And were both Desmond Tutu before the second, and Mandela obviously as well, both came out completely and said this is a lot worse than our conditions were in South Africa before apartheid.
So just discussing this and having compassion for the plight of the Palestinian people that made them categorize you as anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
Did anyone have, and I'm sure someone talked to you about this segregation, did anyone have any kind of argument that they wanted to bring to you as for any justification?
You mean from the Israelis?
Yeah.
No. That's why they call me anti-Semitic. That's why they label anyone who criticizes the apartheid policies. Without criticizing Jewish religion or any Jewish person. I mean, the fact that a lot of the people who are in the government are of the Jewish faith means that they can somehow feel they can conflate criticism of the apartheid policies with a general criticism of an anti-Semitic criticism of the Jewish people or people. Well, nice try, fellas, but it won't wash. That's not what it is. And most of us who get labelled as anti-Semites are not. And like Jeremy Corbyn, for instance, the guy who was removed from the Labour Party in England on the grounds that he was anti-Semitic. He's left-wing and he's pro-Palestinian, pro the idea that they should be Palestinian people, who after all were the huge majority of the indigenous people in the Holy Land back in the start of the 20th century, before the start of the Zionist enterprise, which didn't really get going till 1920, although the idea was happening in the late 19th century, in the 1880s and 1890s. Can't remember the guy's name now. He was a Russian. Thought up the idea of a return to the promised land, as it's called.
Out of all the people that perform music and travel and are as prominent as you are, you're probably one of the most outspoken and informed when it comes to issues on foreign policy and human rights. And when did this become a big part of your life, and when did discussing this publicly become a big part of your life?
Well, it became a big part of my life the day my father died. I mean, I wouldn't know because I was only 5 months old. My father, as you might or may not know, died at Anzio on the 18th of February 1944. I was born in September. But when I started to understand some of this was when he didn't come home and start picking me up from school when I was a little kid. And then, all through my childhood, I was brought up by my mother and brother, my big brother, single-handed. She was also very young. She's an interesting woman because she came from a very kind of middle-class family in London. Funnily enough, they lived in Golders Green, which was sort of well known for being a Jewish community in North London. Her father ran a business that was sort of middleman in fancy goods and toys and things like that, sort of a big warehouse in London. But my mother, and she went off to boarding school, girls' school, so she was brought up in a very straight laced. She then trained as a teacher, and her first teacher training was in a town called Bradford, which is north of London, Arnold in Yorkshire. And it was a huge campus. There she was, first winter comes along. It's really cold, there's a foot of snow on them. And she suddenly notices half the kids in her class are walking to school with no shoes. And something went bing. This week was and she started to look into social conditions there in the industrial north. And even then, in the mid to late 30s, she understood that there were inequalities in the context of the society that she lived in that she felt a personal need to do something about. And she became extremely left-wing. Anyway, cut to later on. So our front room was always a Labour Party committee room, and she was always off in the evenings canvassing at elections and dragging me and my brother to British China Friendship Association meetings in the evening. But she was always very careful and clear with us. That she would, I remember one day she said to me and my brother, when we come back from the meeting, interestingly enough, at the Friends meeting, which is the place that's Quakers, in it, wherever it is in the world. And we've been watching films of K-pop clad Chinese, soldiers fighting against Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalist puppet government and blah, 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 blah. And she said, you know where we've been tonight, don't you, Roger? And I said, no. And she said, we've been at the Friends Meeting House. That is where the Quakers meet. She said, well, as you know, I'm an atheist, so I can't subscribe to their religious beliefs, but I will say this, they are very, very good people. That stuck with me. I can still recount that story now because it's so important. You don't have to subscribe to people's beliefs. I can be a radical atheist and you can be a Hindu. The important thing is that we're good people, that we have hearts and that we care about our brothers and sisters. And my mum did. I'm going to tell you one more mum story and then I'll stop about mum because this is the most important bit. I was 13 years old. I had just gone through a phase where I suddenly realised I was going to die. I don't know if all adolescents have this existential crisis in early puberty, but I did, and I thought, F me, I'm going to die. This is scary as shit, Yeah. Oh my God! And it might have been that, or it might have been something else. But anyway, something was worrying me, and it was probably more some kind of political thing that I'd latched onto, maybe through her. And she looked at me and she said, all right, I'm going to give you some advice now. Go on then, Mum. All through your life, you're going to be faced with difficult questions and you're going to have to figure things out. This is my advice. When anything crops up, it could be anything, it doesn't matter. You must read. That's what Smartonish was telling me. He only read one side. That's the difference between Michael Smartonish and me. I've tried to look at all sides, so I know that you want. Anyway, she said, read. And, very important, learn everything you can about the subject that's troubling you. And, importantly, look at it from both sides. If there's another opinion, make sure you study that as well, and blah, blah, blah. It'll take some time, it'll be hard work, but when you've done that, the work is over. You have done all the heavy lifting. The rest of it is easy. And I went, what is the rest of it, Mum? And she looked at me and she said, the rest of it? Well, that's simple. You do the right thing.
Sounds like you had an amazing mom.
Amazing. Every adolescent should be given advice by a parent of some because that's been jangling around in my head since very often. I remember it, and I tell it to anybody who cares to listen, because it's so important.
It's incredibly important. Like you said, it's rare. That's what's amazing. Like it resonates. It sounds so powerful and true. It's rare.
Yeah, but what happens then, if we're sitting down the pub and I tell you that story and we've got all night, one of us will have another drink, and then we might start talking about the philosophical implications of how you decide what's the right thing to do.
Right.
Because some bloke listening to this, wherever, it doesn't matter where they are, who's Zionist and who believes in Zionist enterprise and in fact in Poland, promised land, let's call it promised land. It's dangerous to call it promised land because then you start getting biblical. Promised? Who was it promised to? Well, it was promised to the Israelis. Whoa, sorry, I didn't mean the promised land. I meant the Middle East. What do you mean the Middle East? That was made up by Sykes and Picot after the First World War, So, but you do get into the thing of, wow, now this really is a fascinating conversation. The right thing to do, should we start talking about now, what's going on in the world now, and what the right thing mean, I've said a few minutes ago that I've been a bit controversial, particularly recently. And part of the controversy is about the Ukraine. What's the right thing to do? All I've done about the Ukraine is to try to lend what little weight I have, to put that tiny bit of power on my shoulder to the wheel of encouraging anybody I can get to listen to stop the war, including Putin. I wrote to Putin 4 or 5 days ago, because people were saying, why don't you tell Putin? Well, just hold on a minute. If you want to join this conversation, you have to do a bit of research. You know? Well, you don't have to, obviously. You can believe, but you should. It would be wise. If you took my mother's advice, before you expressed your opinion, and also, when you're thinking about it, you would constantly put yourself in the position of that young Ukrainian on the front line, and that young Russian and their parents and their uncles and aunts and brothers and sisters in their misery and pain and the lack of anything good at the end. And the more it escalates, the more we send arms, the more Putin, the only thing that they can do is start to talk to one another, just like JFK and Nikita Khrushchev did in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was kept secret for years and years afterwards, because JFK didn't want to look like a wimp. He didn't want to look as if he'd, but he did. He and Nikita Khrushchev spoke on the telephone often, and at the end of it, they did a quid pro quo deal where JFK said, I'll take all our meeting arrangements from Turkey and wherever else. Turkey was the main one, if you take your missiles out of Cuba. So they put their hands across the ocean and shook hands, and that was it. And they did it. And they kept their word. And that led to the later conversation between Reagan and Gorbachev and non-proliferation, all the other things that may possibility of not safe, but a little bit until now. And now, by the second, it gets more and more dangerous. This. So I'm making my position entirely all my interests in that's all.
What did you say to people?
I said that friends of mine think that I said I need to pull the letter up if you want to really hear it. But
Sure.
I'll tell you one thing I said before I pull it, because it would take a minute, was that I said some friends of mine, because I have a guitar playing friend in England who wrote to me, why are you trying to suggest peace and ceasefire? He's a monster. He's going to invade Poland and then he'll invade the rest of Europe and unless we stand up to him now, we're blah, 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 and all of that. So one of the things I said to Putin, a friend of mine thinks that you're going to invade Poland and the other Baltic states, and that you're then going to invade Europe and blah, blah, blah. If that's true, please tell us now so we can all just say, all right, and blow ourselves to smithereens, because that's what's going to happen if you do that. For sure, absolutely sure. You cannot, if you do that, you will start World War III. We know that the Ukraine situation is complicated, and it's been 20 years in the making, and it's, well, I won't go into the making of it. I will. If you've got a minute, I will.
I've got plenty of time. All right. Yeah, I had Tulsi Gabbard on the other day.
Yeah, how is she?
She's great. And we discussed this very thing, and we discussed the United States when they orchestrated the coup in Ukraine, how NATO has been moving their weapons closer and closer to the Russian line.
Yeah.
And this is instigating.
And they've been saying all along, you're breaking the...
Yes.
the agreement that was made between Baker, the Secretary of State, and Gorbachev, where Gorbachev said, okay, I will agree to the reunification of Germany so long as NATO doesn't move 1 inch closer to the Russian border than the eastern borders of Germany. And they went, fine, agreed.
Yeah.
And they've reneged on it completely.
I think what was very important in the conversation we had with CNN is not that Russia is good and that, we should support Russia. There was none of that. What you were essentially saying is that we have to be honest about what the United States is doing. And that narrative is never discussed. And he was talking about the dangers of China. And you brought up the fact that China hasn't invaded anyone in over 100 years. Like, how can you say that when you know about all the unconventional foreign policy decisions of the United States and overseas?
Yeah.
And you look at what China's doing.
Well, they have actually Tibet, which is a huge thing, and it's something that I'm going to bring up, and because it's something I've only learned about recently. Funny enough, I learned about it from my friend Eric, who's a very well-known chef in Europe, and he's a Buddhist. And so he travels to Bhutan at least once a year. And he was recently in India having lunch. And we were talking about it. Predicament. What I never understood is that Tibet is 1/3 land. Exactly, you didn't know either.
Big?
Apparently, yeah, and I haven't yet kind of look, this was a few days ago. I haven't checked it all out and looked on the map. But, yes.
I would have never imagined.
Yeah, I know, but who wants, hundreds of square miles of mountains and things? Well, the Chinese, because it's not just mountains, it's water, which is hugely important. The Himalayas, all the glacial streams, they feed water, not just to India, okay, and Pakistan, but also to the northeast, the whole of China as well. Plus, apparently, and not surprisingly, it's packed with everything that you make chips out of. It's packed with this absolute... I nearly said it's a gold mine. Well, it's not a gold mine.
It's a mineral mine.
It's a mineral mine. It's everything that everybody who cares about making money in the world desperately needs and wants. So it's a fascinating subject.
Well, particularly China, right? Because China's so involved in the Congo extraction.
Well, yeah. I mean, but to their credit, they didn't invade and kill everybody like the Europeans did back in the, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th century. They actually went, would you like to borrow some money? Which is more of an
Sneaky.
American flaw. Yeah, it's more of a kind of modern way.
Yeah.
And if people, and who knows what they do if people say, nope, no thank you, we're good. But they said thank you, yeah.
Sure.
And, should they do it? Yeah, of course they should. They should be able to do business what they want. I believe in the idea of what's called free trade up to that point. There has to be a fair crack of the whip of everybody. And by and large, multinational corporations want to invest under developed countries. They want to be there. They don't want the people who live there to get anything. I mean, I've been involved in corporate for at least 10 years now with Chevron because of the pollution that it caused in northeast Africa, with a friend of mine called Steve Donziger, who was sent to prison for acting on the pop.
Yeah.
I know I'm digressing.
Well, the Donziger case is atrocious. It's a terrifying case because there's no reason why they had that man in prison. There's no reason why they keep him in the house.
Well, there is a
Yeah, right, but no righteous.
no legal.
No legal.
Righteous, that's interesting because that comes back to my mind.
Yeah.
Of doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, the right thing, if you will be doing it, look at the facts and come to the conclusion that Chevron should give the $9.5 billion to the people whose lives they destroy. Effectively, company rights. actually do it. But things being what they are, that's not the way the law works. The law operates whoever can afford it, actually, which in this case is Chevron. They still haven't paid a penny, and they're still fighting, and they will go on fighting. And speaking as somebody who's supporting the other side, who doesn't have bottomless pockets, it's hard to find because they're worried of a domino effect, that if they lose this case, then they're going to lose the case in Nigeria, and they're going to lose the case in Australia, and then suddenly they can see the whole package of work. So it should collapse. Pay up. You've made enough profits out of the indigenous people all over the world.
Which is a scary precedent. They were able to arrest Dawson Girl like that. They were able to keep him in jail with the way they did it.
Yeah, and it was completely corrupt. They did back in 2015. They did a RICO trial, organised crime, regulations or something against organised crime. So they pretended he was a gangster on a fraudulent mission, and they brought this person in the southern district of New York. Incredible.
And that the media is ignoring it too. This isn't.
Well, what else?
People are absolutely outraged.
Well, what isn't the media ignoring? On the media, with the possible exception of you, and some others who have great podcasts as well, but are independent of the mainstream. The media only has one message, which is support the status quo. All of us work for whoever it may be, and we don't need to get all conspiracy theory about secret societies. We know it's very, very wealthy, half of 1%, who tell everybody what to. They're called the ruling class because they are the ruling class, and we all do what we're told by the media, who by and large repeat the same mantra over and over again. So it's a bit tricky.
Yeah, the media has failed in their objective dissemination of information. That doesn't exist anymore. They're bought and paid by the advertisers, and the advertisers are enormously powerful. And so things like